Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. Eastman again, and I'm here doing another one of my mini lessons. This is for Unit 5, Week 1. All of the second grade teachers have jumped to this lesson in language arts, and so there are some skills and some concepts we need to talk about this week. You may be having to do some worksheet pages during the week on this, so this is my instruction for the week. I'd like you to watch it all at once to begin with, and then if there's any part of it you need to go back, you can do that. You can rewatch it as many times as you want. And if there's something that you need better explained, please ask an adult at home, and I'm sure they would be able to do that for you. All right? Thank you. So we're going to start over here with irregular plurals. Now, a singular noun only talks about one thing. And remember, nouns are people, places, things, or ideas. So for instance, dog. Dog is a singular noun. It only talks about one. But if you have many of them in your house, then we would say dogs. And we would add an S to the end. So those would kind of be regular plurals, like if I have one book and I have more than one book, I have books. And I just add an S to the end. So I'm going to underline that. Book is just one, and books is two or more. It can be 2 books, 10 books, 100 books. You know, libraries have lots of books, don't they? So a lot of our nouns, we just add an S to the end to make it plural. Here's an example of dish. And this happens to end with a consonant digraph with the SH. And if we have a word that ends with SH or CH or maybe an S and some other endings, we can't just add an S, we have to add an ES. And so over here, we go from dish to dishes. All right? Now this is what we're kind of used to. I bet you've already learned about this at school. Usually when we take a singular noun, meaning one, and we make it plural, we just add an S or an ES to the end. Some nouns, we don't add anything to the end. Some nouns just stay the same. And you really know it because you can hear it. It sounds right. We know when people speak correctly. So if I see a deer in the forest, all right, or a girl, the little girl sees a deer in the forest. Maybe she's lucky and she sees 3 deer in the forest. But we don't say deers or deeres. We just keep it the same. 1 deer, many deer. Same thing with fish. Let's say there was a little boy. The little boy caught a fish at the lake. Let's say he had a really good day and he caught 5 fish. We would just keep it fish. We don't say fishes. So, 1 fish, many fish. Those stay the same. Now, here are our irregular plurals. What that means is they change completely. We don't just add an S or an ES. They don't stay the same. They change completely. So think about it. Here's the word mouse. Mrs. Eastman saw a mouse run across the basement floor. But let's say there's more than 1 mouse. Let's say there's several of them. Mrs. Eastman saw several mice run across the basement floor. I hope not. But it would definitely go from 1 mouse to several mice. Here we have foot. Okay, the football player kicked the ball with his foot, if he was the kicker. But if I'm jumping rope, I have to jump with both feet to jump rope. And that would go from foot to feet, not to foots. That should sound funny to you. Here's tooth. The little girl lost a tooth, a baby tooth. That's only 1. She has already lost many baby teeth. We don't know. Could be 2, could be 5. We don't know, but it's more than 1. And then we have man to men. So let's say I saw the man waving a flag on the road. There were several men working with equipment on the road. This would be 1 man, this would be many men. Man goes to men. So these are called irregular plurals. Going on. Down here, I'm going to read some words to you, and I want you to listen to the way they sound, and I want you to think about what they have in common. So I need your participation at home. Loud, brown, pouch, cow, out, down. What do you think they have in common? I don't really want you to look at them. I want you to listen to them. I'm going to tap them out down my arm. U, ow, d. B, ow, n. P, ouch. Did you hear that vowel sound in the middle? It's saying ow. And I already talked about this on some of my other posters in my other videos, especially the vowel team one. We talk about diphthongs. The diphthongs, OU and OW. They both can say ow. Remember I said it's like if you're being pinched and you go, ow! Oh, you pinched me, ow! And there is that sound. Please remember though that OW can also say snow, like in snowplow. So down here in my little chart, I put the owl words, and I put the owl words, but these are spelled with OU and these are spelled with OW. And I'm going to show you where they are in the word. Here's out. The OU starts the word in the initial position. Here's owl in loud. The OU is in the medial position, in the middle. Here's owl in pouch. The OU is in the medial position. Now sometimes with spelling, if you can figure out and isolate where you're hearing the sound, is it in the initial, is it in the medial, is it in the final position? Sometimes there's spelling rules that can help you with which ones to choose. So for example, if we hear owl at the beginning of a word, it's usually OU, all right? Now let's look at OW. OW also says owl. Here is OW in cow in the final position. Here's OW in brown in the medial position. And here's OW in down in the medial position. So if you hear owl at the end of a word, we're going to pick the OW, not the OU. So these are our diphthongs, and you're going to be working with those this week. OU and OW both say ow. Going on. Number 3 is about quotation marks. Now, we use quotation marks if we're an author around what a character actually says. The words that actually come out of a character's mouth. The dialogue in the story when characters are talking. Quotation marks are these little marks right here and right here. And we put them around what is actually said. So I wrote some sentences up here. This does not have to do with one of your stories, but it does have to do with being a good citizen, all right? The first sentence is, quotation mark, what will you do with the money? Question mark, quotation marks, asked Luke. So Luke is actually saying, what will you do with the money? It is a question. So we have to have a capital at the beginning. It has a question mark at the end, and those are actually within our quotation marks because those are the words that are coming out of his mouth. And now Katie answered, comma, quotation marks, I will try to find the owner, period, quotation marks, all right? Those are the words that are coming out of her mouth. I will try to find the owner. And that's a good thing that she's doing that. Luke said, comma, quotation marks, that is being a good citizen, period, quotation marks. So in each of those sentences, we have something the character is actually saying, and those sentences are put in quotation marks to show that. The words that are coming out of Luke and Katie's mouths, all right? And this also teaches us a little lesson that if we do find something like money, we should absolutely try to find the owner, and that is being a good citizen. coming down here, pronouns. We know nouns are people, places, things, or ideas. Pronouns are words that can take the place of a noun in our writing or in our talking. So they take the place of one or more nouns. So I'm going to read these sentences to you. You're going to be reading this story later this week. It's called Grace Runs for President. And Grace wants to be class president and Thomas wants to be class president. And you're going to have to read to find out what happens and who wins. But it hasn't been assigned yet. I'm going to read the first one. Grace hopes to become class president. All right. Who is this sentence about? What is the naming part? Can you tell me? Right. It's Grace. Now, if we didn't want to say Grace, we could pick one of these pronouns to take that word's place. We could pick he, she, it, we, they, and there are many more. I just put those choices. Is Grace a he? I don't think so. What do you think? Which of these words can replace Grace? I hope you said she. So here is she, S-H-E. She could replace Grace because Grace is a girl, Grace is a she. Grace is not an it or a he or a we or a they. So she hopes to become class president. Look at the next sentence. Thomas enters the race. All right, who is this sentence about? Did you say Thomas? If you did, you're right. Thomas. Now, Thomas is not a she. Thomas is a what? Which of these pronouns in here? A he. I'm going to make it a capital H because it is the beginning word in this sentence. He enters the race. Now look at this last one. Grace and Thomas both want to be elected. They both want to win. Who is this sentence about? More than one person. All right, it's about Grace and Thomas, both of them. So would I just pick a he or a she? Which of these would I pick to replace Grace and Thomas? You're right, it would be they. T-H-E-Y. And I'd have to mark off Grace and Thomas, okay? So I could say they both want to be elected. They can take the place of Grace and Thomas. Now I have a warning here. If you are writing an answer, if you are retelling a story, when you first start, you want to say the characters' names. So the reader or the listener knows exactly who you're talking about. If I just started with, oh, they both want to be elected, you would have no idea who I'm talking about. Who is they? So when you retell, when you write, please start with the specific nouns first. And then as you write, so you don't have to keep saying Grace and Thomas, Grace and Thomas, Grace and Thomas. You can throw in some he's and some she's and go back and forth between their names and the pronoun that can take the place of their names. All right, but never start a story just with he or she because your reader or your listener will be confused. All righty. So we talked about these skills. Now I want to talk about these concepts up here really fast. They are part of this week's lessons too. Point of view. Point of view has to do with who is telling the story. Point of view can be first person or it can be third person. As you get older, you may learn a little bit more about this, but for now, that's what we're going to say. First person is when one of the characters is actually telling the story, and they're using the pronoun I. All right, I. Third person would be if there's just a narrator telling the story, a storyteller telling the story, and not one of the characters. Perspective is how the character feels in the story, how the character thinks and does his perspective or her perspective change in the story. If you think about a difficult decision, you have Wyatt and Paul, and Wyatt is telling the story. And so Wyatt in the beginning thinks it's totally fine for him to keep the game master. He says, and you can see how he feels by what he says in the story, he says, finders, keepers, losers, weepers. But then after he talks about it with Paul, his perspective starts to change. And he starts thinking, well, what if I lost something? And that poor person who did lose it might be sad. And, is this the right thing to do? Is this what I've done before? And so he ponders that. He's very thoughtful, which means full of thought, and he changes his mind, so his perspective changes. And at the end of the story, he decides, you know what, I need to find the rightful owner of this game master. And he and his mom go and look for the owner, who is very sad and very happy to have it returned. And then Wyatt at the end thinks, you know what, I did the right thing and I feel pretty good about myself. So that's perspective. It's just the feelings of the character and if they change in this story. And you can have different feelings for each character. Next is summarize. When you summarize a story, you just tell the important parts. A retelling is more detailed and specific. So a retelling would be, you're going to tell almost everything you remember in the right order in your own words. A summary is when you're just kind of telling the important parts of what happens. So I'll try to do that really fast here. A summary of a difficult decision would be Wyatt and Paul go to the park. And Wyatt finds a game master. And he's all excited because he wants to keep it. And he, says, it's mine now. But then Paul talks to him, says, I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. Think about it. I'm just going to volunteer, my comment here, my opinion. And then Wyatt thinks it over and decides that he needs to try to find the owner. So he and his mother go looking in the park. They find the owner and they give it back. And Wyatt's pretty excited about that. He feels good about himself. He's a good citizen and he made the right choice. Right? So that would be a summary. I don't tell you every little detail about where they found the Game Boy and everything the two characters say back and forth. And it's just basically about the important things in this story. So it makes sense. The last thing I want to talk about is theme. Theme is something we discussed last week. Theme is the message or the meaning of the story. I think you probably can guess what you think the author's trying to tell you in a difficult decision. Can you tell me? If you think it's about just being a good citizen and deciding to do the right thing, then you're correct. All right? So, remember, you can go back over this. You can watch this video anytime. If you're a little confused about quotation marks, come back and look at my examples. Talk to a parent if you need further clarification. That would be great. I want to say one thing to you. Now, this week is kind of the real deal. Last week, we were doing trial and error. We were getting used to the technology and how this was all going to work. But this week, remote learning really kicks in. And I want your learning to continue. I want these weeks or days to be meaningful to your learning. And so I can see whether you're doing the assignments or not that I've asked you to do. Okay, it shows up on my laptop, so I know if you're participating, if you're doing your work at home, and if you're turning it into me. Remember to save and submit, all right? I hope you're all doing your best. I hope you're happy and healthy, and thank you, and we'll see you later. Bye.